All right, so in this video, we're going to talk about data visualization, but here we're talking about data visualization specifically as a way to communicate with a reader or a user of a website. And previously, we've probably talked about exploratory data visualization. So that's visualization when I'm trying to find a story or I'm trying to learn something from my data. So it's for me, and I'm just thinking about what I can pull out of it. Now we're thinking about how do I actually communicate part of a story to a reader, and there's kind of a couple kinds of visualizations broadly that we'll see. Sometimes data visualizations that get shown to readers or incorporated into a story are about letting the readers really explore the data, right? So we'll put a lot of the data out there and we'll just let them kind of poke around and see what they can find. So this visualization looks at basically who marries who between professions. And so this is a great example of this technique of kind of letting readers find themselves among the data, right? So if you're a crossing guard, you might want to see what other professions crossing guards tend to marry. We're not going to talk about this kind of visualization very much in this video. These tend to be a little bit more labor intensive and they kind of have a different relationship to a story, right? This is putting everything out there and letting the reader explore. What we are going to talk about, though, are other ways of formatting the kinds of visualizations that we have been producing in ways that either make them easier for the reader to understand or that kind of help them to play a more specific role in your story, right? Because we don't include visualizations in a story just for decoration or for fun. They're like a paragraph in the story. They play a role. They might give context. They might make a specific argument, right? So we're going to look at how to make that context really clear or how to make that argument really clear. So this is a really basic example. So if the visualization or kind of the point that you want to make with the data is a pattern, right, or a trend, this is called a trend line, this lighter blue line, and they're just lines that show basically the trend or the pattern in the data, and they help to kind of emphasize to the reader, hey, look, as hours worked goes up, the pay per hour goes down, and this is largely true across. Um, Another thing that can make visualizations easier for a reader to understand is this technique called small multiples, where we could visualize this in one graph, right? And maybe using color to show the differences between countries. But if I break it into these, which are called small multiples, they're easier for me to compare, right? And it's just easier for me to kind of see across these. So this can be a technique that I might not necessarily use when analyzing the data for myself, but when I'm putting it in front of a reader, this can be a nice technique. Finally, if I'm thinking about things like outliers or I'm trying to make a really specific point, things like annotating specific points can be very useful. So here, Rogers was back to completing the tough throws. This is specifically about this one game, and this visualization puts it in context in relation to all these other games, but I'm going to call out this one and make this very specific point, right? So here, including the data visualization um, gives the reader a lot more information than they would have from just a paragraph that said this. It puts weight behind it, right? It shows that there's a lot of evidence behind this claim that you're making. But because it is specific and it is designed in this very specific way, it functions very much like a specific paragraph would. It makes a point. So let's get into Tableau and look at how to implement a few of these things as you're actually working. So let's start out with a bar chart. I create a bar chart with some categories and some numbers, and let's just talk about how to make this bar chart easier to read. So the first thing that I would always do with a bar chart is order it, usually greatest to least, in a way that lets me compare these much easier. You might think about filtering your your bar charts, right, I only want to give the reader kind of what they need, right? And so if I'm only comparing centers, forwards, and point guards, then let's get the rest of that out of there and let's give the user less to think about, right? I might also want to really focus in on the point guards. So the point I'm making is about point guards. Okay, so maybe I want to color by position, but what I really want to do is highlight point guards. So I can come over here to my position tool and I can edit the colors of this so that I actually say, okay, point guards are going to be red, but forwards and centers are both going to be blue. All right, so then I've just called attention to this one. So I don't want to do that randomly. I always want there to be a point to how I'm coloring, but I can use that to draw attention and kind of further my point. So here we've got a scatter plot. It's a scatter plot showing a very clear trend, right? The more points per game someone scores, roughly the more rebounds they get. So this is an example where I might want to add a trend line to help readers notice, oh, I see a pattern here. So if I come here to analytics, it's right by data, I can find trend line and I'm just going to drag it over and get my line. Some of these other options here will create curved lines that will try to better fit the points. For the most part, you don't really want these to be too complicated unless you really know what you're doing. I would tend to stick to straight lines here. Other things that I might do here is I might want to point to an individual player. So let's say that I want to call out this player, kind of like we saw with the with this example right here. And if I right click on this point, I can come to annotate and I'm going to annotate mark. So mark is the thing that I've clicked on. And I'm going to then type whatever annotation I want here, right? So I could keep this and pull in some other variables, or I could just put this person's name. Okay, and it's going to give me one of these guys. If I click, I can move this around a little bit if that's helpful. Whatever works there. To delete these, I can just click and delete. Same with this one, click and remove. Okay, coloring specific points in Tableau is actually a little bit difficult. There's no built-in function that lets me just click on this point and change the color of it. And at this point, there's too many names to do the edit colors thing that we just did. The easiest thing here is to figure out what this point is that you want to highlight. Okay, so this is Kevin Love. Go into your actual spreadsheet for this data, add a column that says highlight, and just say like yes for the ones that you want to highlight. And then once you have in your data your highlight variable, you can drag that to color and play with the colors. But unfortunately in Tableau, that's kind of the best we have. All right, last thing is I sometimes want to add what's called a reference line. So let's say that I want a line here showing the median steals per game, just to kind of help people sort this out. I can come to reference line and drag it over, and now it's going to ask me where I want to put it. And let's undo that so that I can show you again. All right, I'm going to drag it over here, and this is saying where do I want to put it. So I want it for the whole table, do I want it for age, or do I want it for steals per game? Which variable do I want? And you could similarly do this. These would be more for bar charts. So you'll mostly be doing table, and I want to show a reference line for steals per game, and I want it to be the average. I could change this if I wanted to, but average seems to be the one that I want. And then when I have label here, computation means that it's going to show average right here, but I could also change this to custom and type in a label if I wanted it to be different. I'm going to keep it on computation for now. Okay, the other thing that I might want to do is I might want to highlight a specific area of the chart. So let's say really what I'm interested in is the way that steals seem to go kind of sharply down between the ages of 35 and 40. Or maybe I'm writing an article about kind of older NBA players, and I just want to highlight this section between 35 and 40. So for that, I can do what's called a reference band, and I'm going to drag it over here to age for the whole table. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to change the minimum and maximum. So the value here, I'm going to have to do what's called creating a new parameter. And I'm going to call this age 35, and the value will be 35. And then I'm going to create a new parameter for my upper one, and I'll make this age 40 and set the value to 40. And then I'm going to go OK. I would probably want to change these labels, right? Get rid of these labels. But this then just calls attention to this area of the chart in a way that could be useful. Again, if I want to get rid of these, I'm going to click and remove, or click and remove. So the last thing I want to look at is the technique of small multiples that we looked at. And this is really easy. You've probably already figured out how to do it in Tableau, but let's say that I want to look at this by position, okay? So position means I'm gonna have one column for each position, and then it's gonna separate it by age. So I might filter this by position and get rid of the ones that are less interesting. But now I have my small multiples, and the reader can compare across these. This might not be the best example for this, but that is the technique that you would be using. So techniques for making your graphs more useful for your reader. Think about the message that you want to get across with that graph, okay? Is it just a general pattern that helps them understand the story, or is it a really specific point that you're going to want to use color, use annotation to maybe call out specific points and really draw the reader's attention in a purposeful way?